I got friends only wanna talk business. I got expensive, cause winning's expensive. I got expensive, cause winning's expensive. I've been reading all the war, and I've been shutting down the stars.
And welcome to Put That Coffee Down, the Freight Sells a Show for closers here on FreightWaves TV. As always, it's Tuesday, 12 p.m. Eastern Time, and we have a fantastic show for you today. We have one of the OGs of personal branding and content strategy, podcasting as well on the show here today. It's Joe Lynch, the founder of the Logistics of Logistics podcast, LinkedIn community, content, website builder, et cetera, et cetera. I think he's probably interviewed everybody there is to know in the space. And we're going to talk a little bit about, using content marketing to drive inbound leads and how that really changes your organization, it changes your sales game, and also about personal branding as well. I hope everyone had a great Memorial Day weekend. We're back at it, hitting the grindstone once again, heading into December. The freight markets aren't that hot, but that doesn't mean that sales have to cool off, or at least certainly activity. Though the more activity you do during these slow times in the market, it's just laying the foundation for whenever that market turns, the market heats up, to take full advantage of it. I found over the weekend, I found an article in Fast Company, one of those online media publications that really focuses on entrepreneurship and sales. And it is really about, this article is about 5 things to do whenever you're creating your personal brand, to make sure it's not about ego, but about content and selecting your market. Joe and I will talk about a few of these, but it starts off with number 1 is understanding your why and why you're doing this. What value you're bringing to the market. Number 2 is pick a topic that you can dominate. There's very little competition and that a lot about, and you can generate really great content about. Number 3 is something that Joe does really well, and I think I do pretty well too, is bringing on experts to contribute. And if you have a podcast, something like that, finding those names to come in to add value to your audience, using their work, crediting them, and just really making it your own community on top of a community. Number 4 is create an intentional content strategy. Don't be all over the place. No, plan out enough to create intentionality in that. And number 5 is just be yourself. Be your fullest self. Don't worry about what anyone else says, and show your personality, because that's, personality, story building. It all goes in to the same process, and that is why people buy. That people buy based on the whys and the stories, and not because of the facts and figures. Those are just compliments. Those are just nuggets of the broader overall story. But with all that said, let's jump into it and bring on Joe here. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much, Kev. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, whether we're doing it on the podcast or doing it by phone.
I know, right? So we've known each other for a few years now, which is just strange to say, but it has been like 5, 6, 7 years now.
Yeah, Kev, you were the second person to come on my podcast. My friend Steve Elwell was number 1, which was a favor. It was very much a favor. I was like, Kev, come on, do this, please. And you're like, all right, I'm selling stuff. I'll go on.
I know, right? I think that was the first podcast I ever did, that I ever appeared on was your podcast. It was a strange experience, and it gets easier with time.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was like 400 podcasts ago. So it was a long time ago. It was 5 years ago. So it was 5 years in, I think, May. So we're in May now. So yeah. So and you've been on by the way, I did another podcast with you that ended up, I wrote an article. I think it was the riches are in the niches. And
yes.
And then I wrote a little article about it, and that won like the best article, most read article on logistics, or Logistics Brief. So
oh wow.
Anyway.
Oh,
Well, you
that's
remember that
great. Oh,
a
it's
few
a good
years ago.
lesson, right? The
Hmm.
richest are the niches.
Yep.
Yeah. So I was going to ask you that to begin with too. Is how many podcasts have you done so far to
I think
date?
about,
And I think around 400. Is that
I
right?
think it's well over 350. I think it's somewhere near 400. I've never been one to count. And every once in a while, like yesterday was Memorial Day weekend, we just reposted something. Um, and so, but I try and do 3 a week. So it's 150 a year. So take out a number of reposts there. So you end up with quite a bit of
Yeah.
podcasts. So first few years, it
3
wasn't
a
kind
week.
of 3 a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I release podcasts. That's all I do.
That is
So I got
that's
tons.
a grueling schedule in of itself. If you don't do podcasting, it sounds like a lot if you don't do podcasting, but if you get into the minutia of post production and worrying about all the little details and then setting up everything, that's a lot of work.
Yeah, well, I don't ever edit anything, so I have people who help me. So, Kev, I feel like I have the best job in the world. I really do, and I'm not just
Yeah,
saying that. I get to talk to interesting people. Um, I get to talk to interesting people in this business every day, and I talk to founders. I talk to veterans, who've been around and done all the different things. I talk to startup people. It's really it's like full time talking to interesting people and learning stuff. So I can't complain one little bit.
it is. That's one thing that educationally for ourselves, it's off the charts. You don't really think about it when you walk in and start doing these things, but the education that you get by talking to a diverse group of people, as you said, and from founders, to salespeople, to whatever you may have, you learn something every single interview.
Yep. Absolutely do. And then on top of that, you get to know so many people. So you talk to them
Yep.
for an hour, and then sometimes I'm sure this happened with you. You're prepping, and the prep takes an hour, and then all of a sudden you do the podcast, and then you're like, "Oh, we're like old friends by the time we get done with the podcast." So it's a great way to do biz. I love what I do.
It is. It is. Let's talk about the logistics of logistics. The LinkedIn group you founded. When did you found that? And you have well over
Well,
100,000 members now.
yeah, it's like
Is what?
it's like
Yeah.
270,000 people in that
Oh
group.
wow,
Yeah.
wow. When
So
was that? Like 5 years ago, 6 years ago? Was it a little bit
no,
before you started podcasting?
I uh I grew up in automotive, and I started working at 19. I worked got until I'm 47, I think, in automotive, so almost 25 plus years, right? And in 2009, and when everything melted down, I was at a company that I hoped to buy someday. And we didn't get paid by Chrysler, and Chrysler went bankrupt, the whole thing, right? And then I found myself
Mhm.
out of a job, but not only out of a job, but really not in a position to even get a job anytime soon. So I ended up in logistics, but I wasn't from logistics. I was from automotive. I kind of bumped up against it. And so um, I liked how wide open logistics was. I felt like it was behind technology wise. It felt like the wild, wild west compared to automotive. I got into it. I have an executive coach, Ann Holm. She mentioned, why don't you start blogging as a way to grow your sales? And I was like, I am never blogging. That is the dumbest idea. And she's like, yeah, just call it. She goes, just call it the logistics of logistics and write about logistics. And what really made me write about it was I was unemployed or underemployed mostly for a few years, just not making the kind of money I was used to. So I started writing when I was the general manager, COO of a logistics company. 2009, 2010, I started writing the logistics of logistics as a blog. And really my goal from the beginning was I'm going to demystify this industry. And I saw a lot of shippers, myself previously as a shipper, listening to all the jargon. Every warehousing has its jargon. LTL has its jargon. Flatbed has its jargon. All these different segments of our business filled with jargon. And I said, I'm going to write articles and demystify this, simplify it. I always feel like if you can't explain what you do in real simple terms, you don't understand it very well. So that was my
And
goal. And by the way, that's when I started realizing how much you learn when you start writing. I wrote probably 500 articles in my own name, met marketers like Adam Robinson along the way because he was blogging at that time. And then 5 years ago, I started the podcast. And it was just kind of, hey, this is easier than writing. So I still did occasional articles, but for the most part, I'm just a podcaster now.
that's another excellent lesson for sales as well, is leaving the jargon out, right? So if you start a blog, if you start a podcast, it doesn't matter if anyone listens to it or not, or anyone reads it, certainly at first, because no one probably is. It's really for your internal benefit. It is to be a better communicator. But one important thing about that is leaving the jargon behind and explaining it like you're explaining it to a fifth grader, right? In journalism, you write on, I don't know, a seventh, eighth grade level for a reason, right? It's to keep it simple, keep the message simple to where anyone can really digest it. And I think in sales, oftentimes we live it day in, day out, whatever industry we're in. We get consumed with the jargon. We get consumed with
Right.
having a very abstract view of what we're doing, which is good because we know a lot if we have a 30,000 or an abstract view of it, a conceptual view of it.
Right.
But when you're selling to people, they don't have the same view of it. It's got to be dumbed down. Keep it simple, stupid is a great motto. But you really learn that it focuses whenever you write or you interview people for podcasts, but specifically writing, it makes you relearn something at a ground level that then you can go out and communicate with, and it'll drive better sales.
Exactly. And Kev, when I always use this example, I probably used it last time we talked, but I'll use it again. If you were thinking, hey, I want to go out to Napa Valley and I want to go on a trip, and next year, I haven't booked my ticket yet, but I'm just trying to figure out where I should go. Where should I stay? What wineries should I visit? You're going to be Googling just while watching TV, Googling. And what you're going to hopefully find is a blogger who blogs about great places to stay in Napa Valley, the best wineries, the out of the way places that you should visit, the best experiences, the most expensive ones are this one, whatever you're looking for. That's a lot of times how we're buying. If you're sending your kid off to college, you start looking at colleges
Mm-hmm.
online. What programs do they have? So we're always looking for that guide to help us make a purchasing decision that might be 6 months or a year away. And maybe your 3PL sucks right now and you're like, I got to get rid of these guys. Their contract comes up next February. What's out there? We haven't looked for one in a minute. And then you start finding articles by Kevin Hill
Mm-hmm.
or Joe Lynch or whoever else. And you go, oh, I like this. And then you find a podcast they were on and go, yes, this is the guy I like. And by the way, on a podcast, someone can get to know, like, trust, relate to you on some level. And then when they find out you're an expert in their problem, you're like halfway there.
Oh yeah, you're not halfway there. I think you were like 95%
Yes,
there
exactly.
at that point,
Yeah,
right?
when they
So
call
that
you and say,
credibility is the biggest hurdle.
when they call you and say, I heard you on Kevin Hill's podcast and you said blank, blank, blank. And by the way, they already know, like, and trust you or they wouldn't be calling. And by the way,
Mm-hmm.
you've experienced this. We've all experienced this. Have you ever been with somebody who's not particularly likable on a sales call and you think you killed it? And you're like, they have this problem. And I know they have this problem and we can fix it. But my disagreeable buddy over here, they don't like him. He's awkward. He's
Mm-hmm.
weird, whatever it is. And you don't get that business. It doesn't matter if you can solve that problem if they don't like you. We we overcomplicate this
Yep.
sometimes, but we make most of our decisions in emotional ways. Kev, think about next time. I would say anyone listening, the millions and millions of people who are listening today. Next time you go to the grocery store, as you're putting something into your basket, say, "Why do I buy Tide?" And you go, "Well, I guess my mom bought it." Why do I buy the generic beans? You go, oh, beans are just beans. Okay, but I always buy Del Monte corn, right? You're walking around making these decisions that have almost no rationale, no logic
Mm-hmm.
behind it. It's purely emotional. We do it all day, every day. And then at some point, we like to come back and say we make logical buying decisions. We don't.
We don't. It's completely emotional, and we use logic and rationality to explain why
Justify
we did it,
to
to
justify.
justify it after we've done it. But we have no control over it, really. I mean, it is completely emotional buying decisions, and it's just the way it is, and that's how 3PL. No matter what you buy, you might, and that's the reason why oftentimes you'll hear salespeople say this. I mean, this is logically the best possible solution for them. How can they argue with the math? It just works out. So they're not going to find a better deal, but they still say no. And I don't understand it because you're trying to use rationality to explain why they're not buying. It's just emotional. For
Yeah,
some
Kev,
reason, there's some fear of the out there, some fear of risk that is just not letting that potential buyer move forward.
yeah. And by the way, we've all done this also well, it's they're my kind of people. They're right thinking. I had a boss who used to say, they're right thinking guys,
Hmm.
meaning they think like we
Right.
do. So we can work with them. Another term we use is culture. I think there's a cultural alignment here. And we've also, I think every 3PL you might be talking to would have technology and have the right people. But the one you pick, you probably like them more, right? And then you might be willing to say, yeah, we would work with you if you could do this, this, and this. And you might have learned that from the guy who had it, but you didn't like them as much. So yeah, we make a lot of illogical decisions, and there has to be. It's not going to be completely illogical. It's not like you're just going to buy from someone because they like it and they don't have
Yeah.
anything to back it up. But I experienced this. I remember selling with somebody, and they didn't have a transportation management system, and we could nail it. We were a little 3PL, and the guy I was with that day, they weren't on the same wavelength. And it was
Hmm.
noticeable. It was almost like, oh boy, this is like square peg, round hole, just not working. And I remember him saying, oh, I think we nailed it. And I was thinking, yeah, except, I thought to myself, but they don't like you. And they found somebody else. It's because we made them aware that there are 3PLs with really great TMSs out there, and we
Hmm.
should go find one of them. It's not going to be those guys. We don't like them. Yeah.
You
By the way,
educated the.
when I say they didn't like them, it probably is just as likely they didn't like me. We
Now, if you're
don't
an
all
organization, if you're a
fit.
3PL, let's just go with 3PL, and you start a genuine content creation, kind of doing what we've been talking about, whether it's writing blogs or writing content, writing recommendations out there, building credibility, right? Podcasting, it's all about building credibility right there. It really changes, you say culture, it really changes the culture of not only the organization or the 3PL, but the sales culture as well. Whenever you can generate those inbound leads based on your expertise, you're right, building credibility, then 100% cold outreach. I mean, those are two different sales organizations, right?
Oh yeah, and Kev, even before I was doing the podcast, I would do webinars. I did a lot of webinars,
Hmm.
and I remember talking to somebody about, can we move your freight? And they were like, um, yeah, we're working with these guys, blah blah blah. It was just kind of like not going to happen. And I remember I invited them to a webinar we were doing, and it was on cross border shipping back and forth over the Mexican border. And they wrote back and said, yeah, that'd be great. And then they attended. And now I'm engaging with them completely differently. They're like, oh, these guys are experts. They're experts in cross border. They do this every day. They're doing webinars on it. And I think that's the thing we can do now, that when somebody says no or not yet, you can kind of still get them warm them up a little bit with content, because not everybody's going to be ready to buy from. A lot of times when you're selling the larger managed transportation or warehousing, they're still with their incumbent or their
Yep.
existing 3PL, but it gets them you're on the radar now.
You are right, and exactly, it's these enterprise solutions. We were talking about it just a few minutes ago. Is like, well, I'm stuck with my 3PL, my current 3PL for the next 6 months or 9 months or a year, but I'm going to start looking around a little bit, seeing what's out there. Delivering content on a consistent basis keeps them engaged for that 6 to 9 months until they're ready to make the move to accept meetings and then move forward after that. Whatever that time frame is, it keeps them engaged. It keeps you in front of them without being a nuisance of calling, saying, "Are you ready to make a decision yet? Are you ready to make a decision yet?" Because that's not a winning strategy either.
Yeah, Kev, we're all, when we have a problem, whatever our problem might be, think of you as a consumer for a moment, all the problems you have. Do you ever think to yourself, God, I need to find a sales guy. I need to find a sales guy who can build my deck. No, you're like, I want somebody who's really good at building decks in my area. And
Mhm.
we're never looking for the sales team. We're never looking for the marketing team. So, so if somebody's writing about the right way and the wrong way to build decks, and the biggest problem with why decks get old too soon, or the right way to stay in a deck, all the things that an expert might know, and you find that guy, you go, this is the guy. I'm never looking. And by the way, the same day you are reaching out to that guy who wrote an article or did a podcast or created a video about how to manage a deck, how to create a deck, how to keep it in good shape, somebody could be calling you on your phone and you're not taking that call. That could be a guy selling decks. And you're like, I don't recognize that number. Why would I take a call?
I think as buyers, we're not looking for salespeople. We're looking for consultants.
Yeah, we're looking for experts.
Right? We're looking for experts. We're looking for advice. We're looking for how to keep that deck, preserved, lasting a long time. That sells. Explaining
Right.
that, having that expertise, that sells. Not maybe the promotion and price and et cetera, and kind of why you should go with us rather than the next deck salesperson. We don't really want to hear that. We want to hear really good advice.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the pre-internet, you could say anything. And I remember when, this is going to make me sound real old, but I don't care. I remember pre-internet, when some sales team would call, you would say, yeah, come on in. And when they would come in, you would learn industry gossip, who's going out of business. You would learn all sorts of things that you would not know otherwise. I mean, even the industry magazines wouldn't have what was going on. The internet changed all that. Now we're able to kind of go online, go to companies like Gartner or Forrester and say, who is the very best software for this? I can go. Right now, people are always creating lists of podcasts. And Kev, you and I, luckily, we're on those lists. So people go, oh, okay. I don't have to wonder what podcast to go listen to. I found Joe and Kev on the list. And you should always obey those lists, by the way. If you see my name on there and Kevin's name, that's a good list.
Yes. Well, Joe, it's always a pleasure talking to you. We're running out of time here. So real quick, what's 2023 look like for you? Just more of the same content creation?
Well, I do the podcast. I do have some sponsors. So I always have my sponsors on. And more, I'm looking at podcasts now as the foundation, where video clips are becoming an important part of that. And Instagram, obviously, TikTok for some people. I'm not a big buyer of TikTok just because of I do think there's problems with China right now, and I think a lot of us are going to disengage from TikTok. So, but I think it's more of the same. My goal is to help people tell their story, and I think what we're doing right now is like the purest form of media, and maybe the purest form of marketing, because it's really stayed pretty authentic. You're telling your story. Hopefully engaging with people in a way that they go, yeah, I like this guy, I like this gal, and I think they're experts in what I solve. I think that's one of the best ways to get out there and be found, and that's what we're all trying to do, is get found.
Yeah, I know, right? Get found, definitely. Thanks again, Joe. You can find Joe on LinkedIn, The Logistics of Logistics, and then Joe Lynch. Huge LinkedIn following. Thanks again.
Thank you so much, Kev. Always good to talk to you.
Same here. Same here. And this is Joe Lynch again, founder of The Logistics of Logistics. I have a few audio versions, episodes coming out this week and next week on Put That Coffee Down. But that wraps it for this episode. See you next week.
I got friends only wanna talk business. I got expensive, cause winning's expensive. I got expensive, cause winning's expensive. I've been reading all the war, and I've been shutting down the stars.